So I'll just talk a little bit in general, broad terms, about the philosophy behind expressive arts workshops. And it comes out of thinking in psychology and development theory that as human beings, we interact at a very profound and sometimes almost unconscious, inchoate level with the material world, with material objects. And that through our interaction with those objects, we both learn something about the materials of the objects themselves, and in turn, that reflects back our own spirit in some sense. So as it's understood in expressive arts contexts, it's a way of, in essence, talking to yourself and talking to others through a material medium. It emerges, in part at least, out of the work of D.W. Winnicott, the very well-known British child development theorist, who looked very carefully at infants' very early use of objects and developed this really fascinating theory called transitional object theory, where the infant essentially triangulates with the mother through an object like, let's say, a toy, a blanket, some object of the infant's own choosing, and that over time develops the infant's emerging sense of independent selfhood. In a related way, expressive arts workshops take very seriously the materiality of the objects that people in those contexts are working with. And the assumption is, in some sense, that a piece of the self goes into the object and then is reflected back to the maker in a deep and profound way. So as we look at these objects, I encourage you to, in that sense, open yourself up to what they have to say to you. So these expressive arts workshops were conceived by Nan Doolittle, who is an expressive arts therapist in Washington State, and she came out specially to lead these workshops, and I assisted her and learned a great deal in the process. I'll speak first about the bowls and then about the staffs, although Nan really conceived of them as being linked together. The bowls were made by parents of survivors, and the staffs are made by survivors themselves. And in that sense, each object reflects the experience of each group. So the bowls made by parents of survivors were a complex process, conceptual and sort of aesthetic, artistic process of thinking about what it means to contain something, to hold something, in the sense of providing a safe space and nurturing, which is, of course, what parents do. And the parents were really interested in how to, I think, not simply decorate the bowls, but interact with the idea of containment and creating a safe space. And we gathered a number of objects, many of them teal colored, like turquoise and threads and yarn, and in some case, parents also did some very interesting manipulations of the bowl itself by drilling holes in the bowl so that beads could be strung through from one edge of a bowl to another. In a sense, in the case of the one bowl that's here on the pedestal, to speak to the family's journey, sort of along lines of, along pathways. And in essence, the bowls are containing a message, as it were, of hope and of honoring the survivors. So the staves, as Nan Doolittle thought of them, are about strength and steadfastness in a certain sense. A staff that you would carry for walking, but also for emplacement in a certain way. And we spent time as a group talking about how to interact with the staff itself. Everyone chose their own staff. There was a whole group of staffs that were prepared especially for this workshop. And every participant chose their staff and then really engaged in an interaction with the staff, with the piece of wood, to think about what should be on there. And as you can see from this wonderful collection, there were a number of really creative responses. This first staff played in part with the Japanese idea of kinzukuri, meaning literally with metal and mending, in which it's a tradition in Japan of celebrating cracks or rips with some precious substance. In traditional tea bowls, cracks are mended with gold. And so in this staff, you can see the parts where the branches came out, the little joints on the trunk of the staff are filled with gold. There's gold thread wrapping around the staff itself. And then there's a combination of teal colored threads, beads, and feathers. And it's a very powerful, I think, and beautiful response. And then we move to this really spectacular array of staffs that again are expressing an interaction between the maker and the staff itself. And so everyone, of course, has a slightly different relationship with their staff and with the materials they use. So in some cases, wrapped thread around the length of the staff with beads, painting gold with photographs also attached to the staff itself. And this wonderful sort of tassel at the end that moves in really beautiful ways. And you can see all up the line of the staffs. There are wonderful aesthetic responses and conversations between, again, the maker and the material. And when they are held vertically in a group, not unlike the tree display with teal ribbons, they make also a very powerful statement. So there's a way to look at them horizontally, but also remembering that they are, in some sense, made to be held vertically as a symbol of strength and fortitude. So I'll just respond quickly to, I think, this really impressive piece by Elena Cram. The title is Emergence, and it's hand-dyed cotton thread, which she hand wove. And the thread itself is she hand painted before, as it were, dressing the loom, which is what the term is for putting the threads on the loom. And this was over a period of time, so the dyes were absorbed in, as you can see, a kind of variegated pattern. And she dyed both the warp, which is the vertical threads attached to the loom, and the weft, which are the threads that go across. And when you look at this piece, you'll see, and I encourage you to come up close and look at it carefully, there's really spectacular variation as you look at details of the way in which it was made. It also refers to a very ancient technique called ikat, I-K-A-T, originating in South Asia and Indonesia, where threads are bound before they're dyed and then unwrapped, and it creates a kind of painterly quality. Here too, what Elena has accomplished, which is very difficult in weaving, is this very painterly, almost brushstroke-like technique where you can see these waves of, for instance, in this area, darker color over the lighter teal blue. And you can see there's shades of teal and darker blue and maroon moving to the final panel, which is dominated by this brilliant orange-yellow sphere. And so you read it in a progression from left to right, from the shortest panel to the middle panel to the taller panel on the right. I'll just bring your attention to a couple of quick details here in the middle panel. These sort of triangular sections, one's here, one is here, and another here, are actually tapestries. So if you look closely, you can tell where the threads, in essence, sort of turn around, right? The darker threads are coming this way, the weft threads, and then they turn around. So what's really fascinating is that she's combining both these very painterly techniques with a kind of hard edge tapestry technique. I have interviewed her on another occasion, and I think I should let her speak for the significance of this work. But I'll simply comment that it's moving from darker colors to lighter and brighter, and that Elena describes this as essentially a symbolic landscape that expresses her own experience. So I encourage you to listen to her words directly as we recorded them.